Welcome to The Narratives of Suicide, the podcast where we bring hope, community, and a voice to those who've lost to suicide. It's where we dispel the myths of suicide. We dispel historical discourses and constructs that have been steeped in history for a very long time, and we're here with hope, love, and support for everyone out there who needs to listen to this podcast. I'm so sorry you're here, but I do hope it can give you something to use in your healing process, to be able to pick up the pieces of suicide and put them back together again in the best possible way that you can. Welcome to the Narratives of Suicide podcast with your host, Sue. Really happy to be here today. And I'm so sorry that you are, because if you're listening to this, you've no doubt had suicide happen in your life in one way or another. It's maybe you're a survivor yourself. Maybe you've had really difficult mental health problems that you're getting through and you've faced the question of suicide, or maybe you've lost someone to suicide like me. And maybe you're here just to hear more about suicide, because my belief is the more we talk about it, the more we speak up about suicide, the more it becomes less huge baggage that some of us carry silently around the world without being able to share it with anyone. And not being able to share it with anyone leaves this shame, guilt, and this silence that means we can't get the care we need with the support we need. And we're almost locked inside our own bodies, our own minds. So as I'm a psychotherapist and a final year doctoral student in psychology, I'm ready now to talk about my brother's suicide more than ever. And I'm ready to find voices together, because I believe we're stronger together. I believe that those of us that have experienced suicide in one way or another can come together and break the silence. This first episode is me. Most of these episodes are going to be interviews with other people, because I do believe in this idea of being stronger together. And unless we hear numerous stories of others' losses, gains, healings, transformations, laughter amongst the sorrow, amongst the pain, we're not going to get a true picture of the complexity of suicide, because it's very complicated. So today I just want to talk about my journey and why I'm here even doing this podcast, to start off the process. But after that, I'm going to be leaving you with other people's stories. I might do the odd one myself to catch up on anything I've learnt along the way, but really this is for the voices of other people, not just me. But today I do want to take the space to share my story with you, because this podcast is about the stories of suicide, the narratives, what's left behind. So it all started for me in November 2015, 24th of November. My brother went missing, my eldest brother, my big brother. There was 4 of us in the family, and he was the eldest. He looked after me growing up and was this stable figure for me throughout my life, part of my attachment as a child. And so we were really good friends, best friends. You know, he was the one who I would call if I needed help or support, and he would always be there. And he was like that with many people. But on that day, he went missing and nobody knew where he was. And then by the afternoon, we'd heard he'd taken his own life. So no words can say how that felt. There's no words that really can comprehend the enormity of that phone call and what it did to me in the minutes that it occurred, and how my world kind of fell apart around my ears, and the events that unfolded then, telling my family, finding out what had happened, because he looked, and to all appearances he was fine. To everybody else, he was fine. He had a business. I think he came 5th in a bodybuilding competition not long before. So he had more muscles than you can even imagine on a person. He looked great. looked fantastic. Married, 2 stepchildren, 3 children, and he was just the high flyer in the family, the golden boy, the one that always from a very young age was going to be successful. So those days were really picking apart that and trying to make sense of what went wrong, what was it that drove Andrew to take his life, to come to that point where he didn't want to live anymore. And the events unfolded, the funeral, I stood up and spoke at his funeral about him, about what he gave to us and everyone in his life. He'd given me his car a couple of years before. My car, I'd had a string of terrible experiences with cars, that kept breaking down. And he said, well, have mine, I don't need it anymore. It was an old one. And he just gave it to me. No question about it. He would, do anything for anybody. So this process came after his death, trying to work out what went wrong. And the funeral, I wanted to speak about him as a person and how he was so amazing. And all of those events, I never thought in my lifetime I would ever experience. A couple of years before that, my mum had died. She died of something called Pick's disease. So I spent the final year of her life helping my dad with her and saying goodbye. And it's called anticipatory grief, where you have time to say goodbye to somebody before they leave. But even that was traumatic, difficult, but it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about life and death and how we're so fragile and we need to look after each other. That was one type of death, one I could accept eventually, because although I miss Mum still to this day, she was only, early 60s when she died. So she wasn't old, and it was a big shock. But still, I learned to accept it because, there was a reason. There was a disease that nobody could have predicted or controlled, and I came to terms with that. But with Andrew, it was extremely different to that, because nothing could quite help me to accept that he had decided he didn't want to be here anymore. Because my big brother, the amazing big brother he was, if he couldn't survive in this life, how on earth can I? The little sister, the sister who didn't always get it right and wasn't the perfect one, and how was I going to survive if he couldn't? It meant that I did all the processing I could, and I remember sitting in my therapist's office a year later saying, it feels as if my belief system is just in shatters all over the floor, and I don't know which part to pick up first. I don't know how to make sense of my life now that Andrew has decided he doesn't want to be here anymore, because he was my attachment figure and he was part of my belief system, in the rights and wrongs of life, of the things we do in life, how we behave in life, who we are as human beings. And I couldn't work out where to even start to pick those pieces up and make sense of them. So I did a lot of therapy after that. I did start to pick up the pieces, and I have. And we're sort of talking now 4.5 years later, and I'm in a massively different place. But there's been things that have happened along the way that have helped me. I still, to this day, still look at pictures of Andrew and say, really, did that actually happen? Suicide, really? Is that part of my family now? Is it part of who we are as a family? Is it part of me now? Is it really, did that actually happen? So there's still a lot of fragility for me around the whole subject. And something in me just can't let it go. Something in me cannot just let it sit and fester in the background. Hence, I'm doing this podcast, and hence I've done a lot of things since his death. So in 2017, in April, I did the London Marathon. I think it was Christmas time when I saw an advert. I was a counselling trainee at the time. So I was a counsellor, trained counsellor, but I was doing a doctorate in counselling psychology, and I needed to do some training. So I was doing training for Place to Be. It's a children's charity that offers counselling in schools. And they were asking for people to run the London Marathon to raise mental health awareness as part of the campaign with the royal family called Heads Together in 2017. I saw that and thought, I could run. I could run the London Marathon for Andrew in honour of his name, to tell his story, to raise awareness, to say this isn't okay, that this happens in life, that people's mental health is as it is, to the point where it was with Andrew, that he didn't want to be here anymore, that he couldn't be here anymore. So I applied and they said yes. And I said I'd never run the London Marathon. I never ran in my life before. And my sister ran the London Marathon, bless her, a few years before, and I watched her cross the line. And she was exhausted and she fell over the line. And I said, I'm never doing that. Why would you do that? Why would you voluntarily run 26 miles? I can't even remember. There's avoidance there and how many miles it is. Is it 24 or 26? It's a lot of miles. And I said, I'd never run that many miles. So, there was this drive behind me applying for the London Marathon, a drive that I don't quite, if I look back, I can't, again, it's one of those surreal things I can't quite believe happened. Why would I even apply for that? But there was a drive behind me doing it for Andrew and for us as a family and for mental health. And I trained then from December through till April, and I ran the London Marathon in 4 hours and 20, I think it was. So I didn't do too badly. If anyone's run a marathon, that's not bad. And the training was worse than the day itself, I must admit. Mother's Day, the month before, turning up to my dinner with my children for Mother's Day, and I couldn't walk because I'd run sort of 3 hours that morning to train ready for the marathon the month later. So it was that part that was difficult. And also this doctorate I'm doing, the counselling psychology doctorate I'm doing, which I'm at my final year of now, hooray. This too has also meant that I've done research into suicide bereavement. So during the London Marathon campaign, I spoke to the Daily Mail, the newspaper. I spoke on Radio 5 Live about Andrew. And it was really kind of me living out loud with what had happened to me, to Andrew, to the family, to say this isn't okay. And I cannot keep this inside. There's something in me that just couldn't keep it silent. And I wanted to break this stigma that is around suicide, because I could see it in my family, some of my family members, and I could see how difficult it was to share. I've now been on this journey with doing research for the last 2 years, where I'm interviewing people and then analysing their stories from a psychological point of view. And I'm putting those findings together at the moment. I can't wait to release the results. But for now, all I'll say is that the whole process for me has been life-changing, because where I couldn't assimilate my brother's death into my life, I'm now able to, because I've spent these past 4 years challenging myself to do really difficult things like run the marathon, like do a doctorate and do the research and hear people's stories. So although that can be painful and it hurts and it's difficult for me to sit and listen to other people's stories because it brings back all my memories. But there's such a part of me that is driven to do this, driven to do it because I cannot let it settle. And as I do it, I heal. For example, last summer I was doing my interviews, and by the end I had a headache constantly every day. I was tense, I was feeling ill, tired, exhausted, almost burnt out. And it was, if I didn't have support around me where I could say to people, I'm struggling with this at the moment, and give that time to heal and pass through me. That was the healing process for me, to hear, to experience the pain again, to feel it now in a different place, on a different level. At the point of life I'm at now, especially when it's to do with good, to do with purpose, to do with sharing this research with the world so that we can all learn from the experience of those that have lost to suicide and help other people then when they're experiencing suicide loss, to know that they're not alone, to know that there's hope, to know that there is a path, there is a way of you living with this in your life. It's never going to disappear. It's never going to just, it's not that you're never going to think about it again and accept it fully. I think to accept it is completely the wrong word. But we can move on with our life. We can move on in the way that we need to. And we all do that so differently, because suicide is complicated. Anyone who's taken their life, there's a whole complexity of reasons as to why they came to that decision they did. Why on that day there was no other options available to them. And we know this because you hear from suicide survivors, the people that have attempted suicide and survived, and they discuss this, how there's almost a cascade of events that happen that lead up to this moment when there just seems no other option available to them. And that helps me to accept to some degree that this was Andrew's choice. It was his right. And choice is a difficult word, and I use it very carefully, because when we say somebody chose to kill themselves, it can really leave the person left behind feeling really complicated emotions like Why didn't he stay alive for me? Did he not love me enough? What was it about me that meant he didn't want to be here anymore? What did I do wrong? So we've got to be careful with the word choice, because I don't think it's necessarily about choice. It's about a decision that he had no other option. There was nothing else available to him at that moment, at that time. And this is the complexity as well around suicide. What I've noticed is we have to be so careful with our words. Words become so powerful, and just the word suicide is so powerful. I tell anyone I'm talking about suicide, and it's almost as if the mood in the room drops and we're left with this heavy sense of this kind of really complicated, death is hard for anyone to speak about. Death, I think I heard a couple of days ago, there's money and death, and those two areas, we're all really, it's a complicated story that we just don't even want to face. So to face suicide, to face the idea that someone has to do that decides they don't want to be alive anymore, it's almost as if you don't think about it until it happens to you. And when it happens to you, I don't mean to you, but I mean either you attempt suicide or you're left behind with a suicide loss, you then have to face it, and you have to face it head on with the complexity of grief. And grief on its own is difficult enough as it is. It's so complicated depending on your relationship, where you are in your life, what happened before, why they died. It's such a big subject. And because we're all not that comfortable talking about the fact that we're all going to die, it's difficult enough as it is, but we, left behind from suicide, have these stories to make. We have to make sense of these stories now in our belief system. So like when I picked up the shattered glass, suddenly one piece was now suicide, which wasn't there before Andrew died. I hadn't even thought about it. The word would have been said, and I may have thought about it. Celebrities have died from suicide, and I've heard it in the news, but I didn't give it much attention, pay much attention to it. I didn't want to. It was kind of like one of these subjects that it's a taboo subject because it's so heavy and complicated and rooted in existential beliefs. And suddenly I had to make one piece of my puzzle, one piece of my glass, my shards of glass, suicide. And the only way I felt I've been able to do that is through action, movement, living out loud like I'm doing right now, because that's how I heal, and that's how I'm able to integrate that piece of the puzzle into my life. Otherwise, I kind of don't want it to be there. I still don't want it to be there. I don't want it to be there right now, but I have to. I've got no choice. My brother didn't have any choice, and I haven't got any choice. It's here. It's in my life. It's happened to my brother, and in essence to me, because I'm left with the grief of it, and which is so huge and complicated. It can't just be. I feel like it just can't be ignored. The trouble is, when you lose someone to suicide, it's rooted in so much stigma. The word itself is so heavy, so complicated, that so many of us find ourselves isolated. Family fractures happen because, we're all trying to work out what went wrong, what happened, and we all grieve differently. So we end up with fractured families more so than in any other type of death, where we end up feeling really isolated and alone in our grief. And that's a very lonely place to be. I remember at one point thinking, no one can possibly imagine what this feels like. And it doesn't matter how many times I tried to explain it to somebody who hadn't experienced suicide, the more it just felt like it was landing on deaf ears. No one could understand that. I remember feeling like that. And it feels really difficult to be in that place, because then you can't get the empathy you need, the care you need. I still feel like that today with people I speak to who don't understand, who haven't been there, haven't experienced it. But the amazing thing is, when I speak to people that have, when I speak to people that have lost someone to suicide or are suicide survivors and attempted suicide, the walls come down. We all kind of can stand in silence with each other and allow the enormity of it to be in the room without it dragging us so far down. We're all able to say, you get it. It really feels like that to me, a complete sense of, you get it. I don't have to explain everything to you. You just get it. You know how enormous this is and how it feels. So thank goodness you're in my life right now, because you can hold me and I can hold you together, arm in arm, hand in hand, shoulder by shoulder, because we just get it. And that's what happened at the London Marathon with me. Because we were all running with these blue headbands on and these blue vests for the Heads Together campaign, I was running past somebody else and I saw the vest and I ran alongside her and I said, so why are you running for Heads Together? Well, I was panting, by the way. And she said, I've lost 3 members of my family to suicide. And we didn't say anything else. We just ran. And I felt this was the first time I'd experienced this. I felt a really massive, strong sense of belonging, and I didn't have to say anything else. And we ran together for a little bit longer until our pace kind of didn't match anymore. And then I said, thank you. And I left. And I only needed to be held for a little while. We only needed to be like that for a little while, but then we moved on. And I think that works a lot with the collaborations that we're having as suicide survivors, suicide loss survivors. You know, we come together, we talk, we do podcasts, we do campaigns, we do books, we write books, we go on to conferences to share with other people, all with this drive to help other people because we know what it's like, because we know how lonely it can be, because we want to break this stigma, because it's not fair. It's not fair on us left behind, and it's not fair on our family members who we try and protect, because we don't want them to become the suicide victim. We want them to stay our loved ones. I want Andrew to stay Andrew, not the man that died of suicide. So I do these things to protect him, protect his honour, protect his name. And I will continue to do that for as long as I can, as long as anyone will listen to me. So if you're listening to me, thank you very much, because I really appreciate that. And I really want you to know that you're not alone, that there are sadly many, many people out there who understand the complexity of suicide, the enormity of it, and the grief that's involved. You're not alone, and that's why I'm creating this podcast, so that you can hear you're not alone. Because by sharing our stories and hearing other people's stories, I do believe that's how we can heal. It's one way. There's many other ways, but that's one way, and it's worked for me. Because when I was hearing the stories during my research, yes, it was painful. Yes, it brought back memories. Yes, it hurt. Yes, it created tension in my body. But with support, I got through it, and I felt better at the end. What's that saying? You've got to go through the tunnel to come out the other side to the light. You know, it's really been true in my life. So I want to create this platform for everyone else to share their stories for that reason, because I want everyone to be able to heal the best way they possibly can now that they've got suicide as part of their belief system that they have to try and make sense of and come to terms with and carry on living every single day with that as part of their belief system, because it's not going to go away. And we can all find our different ways of healing from it, learning from it. And there's no true place of complete healing or complete acceptance, but we cope every day the best way we can without becoming too resilient that we ignore it completely, but we're tapping into it when we need to. We're noticing it when we need to, and we're allowing it to go through us when we need to. And I do think even if you can't live out loud like I am, speaking about it publicly, you can still live out loud privately. You can still dance, you can still sing, you can still write in a diary or a journal or a book without publishing it. You know, you can still attend conferences on suicide loss without being vocal. You can still run, you can still go out on the bike, you can still do things in your life to keep a connection with your loved one. I've still got my brother's jumper that I'll wear. You know, I'm not keeping absolutely everything of his, because I don't think that would be helpful to remind me constantly, but I still do have memoirs around the house that help me to feel that I'm still connected to him. And I do connect with him spiritually too, which helps me. You know, I feel like I can talk to him when I need to. He's always on guard there for me, ready to talk to. And because I know him so well that I know what he would have said anyway, pretty much. So don't even have to call him anymore. I can just speak to him wherever I am. And there's lots of views about reincarnation, life after death. I do believe in reincarnation. I do believe Andrew's peaceful now and he's somewhere beautiful and where he needs to be right now. And that's okay for me right now. But I've not always felt like that. And I think these thoughts of life, death, reincarnation, the spiritual beliefs I've got have helped me and supported me in accepting as much as I possibly can and healing from as much as I possibly can his death. I keep saying that because there's no set, I'm healed, I'm done, I'm accepting it, because it's not. It's so much more complicated than that. And it's still been only 4.5 years. I know that's much longer than many people who just experienced suicide, but I'm not 20 years on either, where I've come to a different place maybe. Mental health is real. Mental health affects many, many, many people. And as a psychologist now, as a trainee psychologist, as a psychotherapist in private practice, I help people with their mental health as much as I can. That had its own impact. When my brother died, I was a counsellor and I thought, gosh, why didn't he come to me? We've all got our reasons and thoughts that might show up when we think of our own part in the story of our loved one's suicide. All I can do with that is notice when that thought shows up, because it's probably my critical mind saying, what did you do wrong? We've all got the critical mind. We've all got that watches our behaviour to make sure we're behaving appropriately. And that's just that critical mind speaking, trying to find fault with myself. And I notice that critical mind and I diffuse those thoughts by just allowing them to run through me. They don't last long if I don't pay them too much attention. I don't push them out because that would give them energy. I don't pull them in. I don't give them too much energy. I just allow them to be there. Acceptance and accepting of them and allow them to run through, which is difficult to do sometimes. And it's something I've practiced for a long time since I've been doing therapy and having therapy. I've learned how to do that. And that's just given me really strong tools to be able to process this as much as I can. So that's me for today. I've shared my story as much as I think I need to at this stage. Please come and follow me on Instagram. And I'll be doing a support community as well online soon, which is www.suicidegriefsupport.com. And I really hope to see you there, because you matter, you're important, I see you, I know you're there. I know if you're listening to this, you need support and you need help. So come over and get some, because it's what I'm there for. I do share more on Instagram too of the differences in suicide bereavement and other types of bereavement, the history of suicide, what sort of narratives we're steeped in terms of our laws and our discourses and constructs we live with in today's world. And it's very linked to mental health, suicide is. So I share all that on Instagram. I share hope and I share some love and support there too. And I will hopefully see you back here on the podcast when we'll be interviewing beautiful people who share their stories of going from losing someone to suicide to now, and what's happened in between. How have they coped? How have they survived? How do they keep waking up every day and putting one foot in front of the other the best way they possibly can? So I love you and leave you. Sending so much love. I'm so sorry you're here. For whatever reason you are, keep listening and keep supporting the podcast by liking it, following it, whatever you need to do on Apple and iTunes and Spotify, because the more you do that, the more it'll go to the top and the more we can allow suicide to become something that isn't shied away from and isn't a word that people are scared to say. Bye for now. Thanks so much for joining us here today. I hope it served you and given you something for your journey with suicide. Come back and subscribe, like, do whatever you need to do on your platform to help us to raise awareness of suicide, because the more we keep saying the word, the more we can gain support for us left behind, and the more we can raise awareness of the word and how society sees it and reduce this stigma that's so attached to it. Please get in touch. You can find me on my website, suicidegriefsupport.com. I really want to hear from you. But for now, please take care of yourselves and take care of each other. And remember, we are stronger together.